ॐ वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्. So we were discussing the 26th verse of the 10th chapter. As I mentioned earlier, people take this chapter rather lightly because most of the verses are nothing but the expression of some kind of glory of the different objects, inanimate as well as animate objects in nature that we see around us. So they can't find a connection why Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna, uh, why he's trying to glorify some of the created beings. Either they may belong to the vegetable kingdom or animal kingdom, or maybe even inert objects like Himalayas. So in the previous verse number 25 says Thavaranam Himalaya, in among the steady things in this world. So there is a deep significance. He just does not casually mention. When Arjuna asks Sri Krishna, how do I know about the glory of the Lord? So he's trying to take up some samples from nature. Of course, the full glory of the Lord cannot be comprehended. Because it is so mystical, in the sense nature is not a full expression of the glory of the Lord. It's a partial expression. According to Vedanta philosophy, Prakriti or nature, no doubt it appears glorious to us, the wonders of nature, and man is fascinated by that. But in spite of all the glories that Sri Krishna lists here in this chapter, he warns Arjuna in the beginning that I am giving you a sample of the glory that the Lord possesses. This is not a complete set of the glories. You can, in fact, his glories are infinite. But at the same time, he says, human mind is so fascinated by the things that he sees around him or her, that he considers some of the species as glorious. For example, he said, among the animals, I am the lion. So lion, according to, uh, in the animal kingdom at least, we consider the lion to be a very royal and a glorious animal, compared and the king of the forest. He has been described in various ways in different cultures. Though there may be animals stronger than the lion, but in many ways, lion is considered to be the king of all animals in many cultures, including the Indian, especially the Vedic and the Indian culture. It's not just because of the ferocious nature of the lion. There may be tigers who are more ferocious than the lion. But you must see there is a kind of royal, some kind of royalty associated with the lion. In fact, in the Indian culture, the word simha stands for lion. So if anything is great, like the greatest, the main door is known as Simha Dwara. Dwara means the door. There are many doors which give you entry to the palace. Maybe there is a back door. But the main door or the main entrance is always known as Simha Dwara. Now, we also know a very popular word which is known as Simhasana. There are many asanas. Asana literally means some kind of seat. It may be a chair, it may be some kind of seating arrangement. But the seat on which the king sits is known as Simhasana. So there's some deeper meaning in all this. Lion has, in Indian culture and many other cultures, has been somehow associated and considered to be the king amongst all the animals for many reasons. And that is how literature has grown around the concept of lion. So what Sri Krishna is doing is that since your mind cannot free itself from the clutches of nature, nature will somehow impress you, or nature will somehow confine your mind to limited possibilities. So when that is done, try to see the most superior among the species. Among animals, lion. Among trees, now we'll come to Ashwatha tree. I'll tell you why Ashwatha is considered to be superior among trees. So Sri Krishna is taking one object after another with the only purpose of directing the mind of an aspirant. In this case, it is Arjuna, but through Arjuna is trying to convey some ideas to us in this Vibhuti Yoga. The powers of the Lord, though they are incomplete, they are not complete. In the sense, it does not describe the Lord in his entirety. I mean, you can't describe the Lord with the help of these sum of samples or species. But the reason why he is doing is, when we live amongst animals, when we encounter trees of different varieties, if there are certain trees, certain animals, certain objects which demand our attention, being the one of the best among the species which they represent. So that's why through all these verses, Sri Krishna is trying to focus on the great things among the things that we encounter every day, and somehow direct the mind towards the Lord, towards Ishvara, or towards the Supreme Brahman. Because the formless aspect of God cannot be grasped by the limited mind. But we have some idea of greatness. We tend to compare one species with another and consider certain species, even among men. We consider certain categories of men far superior than the others because of their wonderful qualities, because of their nature, the intrinsic nature and the nature that they manifest. All, no doubt, everybody would like to say that all men are equal, but we know it's not a fact. There are certain people who are more than equal. They may have shared the same biological characteristics, but when it comes to their character, their qualities, they differ vastly. Otherwise, there would not be so much of discrepancy. So it's not that the Lord is belittling the other animals or the other plants. When he says, among the animals I am lion, among the trees I am, among the rishis I am so and so, they Narada Rishi and all those things, he's just trying to tell Arjuna that when you meditate on the changing things, the world around you which changes, if you keep your mind on a very high level and try to focus on the best specimen among all the other species, the best specimen or the best among them, among a particular species, then there is a chance that you might focus your mind on the infinite. So that is the reason why Sri Krishna in these different verses tries to focus on different aspects of his creation. So now we come to the 26th verse, which we just begun last time, but we will discuss it. Ashwatha sarva vrukshanam devarshinam cha naradaha gandharvanam chitrarataha siddhanam kapilo muni. Now, why does he say these are the four categories? Among Ashwatha is a tree. I think you know what Ashwatha tree. It's popularly in England, I think it is known as a fig tree. So it is very sacred in the Indian tradition, Ashwatha tree. Sarva Vrukshanam, amongst all the trees. He could have singled out many other trees. There were mango trees and other things. But there is something about this Ashwatha tree, something of the nature which conveys to us the eternal nature of Brahman. Though no Ashwatha tree, or for that matter, no tree is permanent. Everything is temporary. Some are more longer lasting, some have a longer life than the other trees. But among all the trees, Sarva Vrikshanam, I am Ashwatha. Devarshinam Narada. Among all the rishis, I am Narada. I'll tell you why he singles out Narada. There are many Dev rishis. Of course, he has classified rishis into 2 or 3 categories. One is Maharishi, Deva rishis. So Devas are luminous beings. They are not some supernatural beings. They are human beings. Among human beings, there are certain people with some kind of luminosity, not physical luminosity, but some kind of mental development which makes their mind more luminous than ordinary human beings. Div is the word which is used. Deva has come from the word div. Div means bright, that which shines. So one whose intellect shines as compared to others. Not that others don't have a mind, they have a mind, but they are not discriminative enough. The buddhi, two faculties of the mind we discussed very often, that mind has been divided into four parts, but the two main parts are, one is a reactive mind, which all of us possess and share with the animal world. So the reactive mind, no doubt, even if it is highly developed, a highly reactive mind may be very intelligent. It may be able to grasp things, understand things intellectually, academically. He may be a very bright person as far as reaction to the natural phenomena. Some people become geniuses because they react better than other people. Some react in a very dull way, so we call them ordinary. They border, I mean, they are like animals. Animals also react. In fact, some of the animals, as I pointed out last time also, they have far better sense organs than human beings. For example, the dog has a very strong sense of smell. So in that sense, they react much better to smell than human beings. So for that reason, we don't consider a dog to be superior than a human being. Similarly, there are other senses. The kites which fly high in the sky, their eyes are very sharp. They can detect anything, very minute things from that height. But that doesn't mean a kite is more intelligent than us. So buddhi or intelligence is a quality which gives a kind of luminosity. When they say deva or a devarshi, a rishi whose mind is illumined by wisdom. Wisdom is that which distinguishes man from animals. Animals also have a highly reactive mind, sometimes very intelligent mind, but unfortunately they don't have the higher wisdom, which is known as buddhi. In fact, the whole of Indian spirituality revolves around this concept of buddhi, the center of consciousness, which makes us wiser and better human beings, more spiritual human beings, because our intellect is illumined by a keen sense of discrimination, what is good and what is bad. The more a person or a human being possesses this luminosity, that's why we call buddhi the higher aspect of the mind, whereas the reactive aspect of the mind is known as manas. So no matter how intelligent a person is, we can say that his manas has been developed, his reactive capacity, he's a highly skillful person in the world. Perhaps he can do multitasking, he may do many things which a normal human being may not be able to do, or animals definitely can't be doing. He may be far superior to them as far as his intellect is concerned, but that doesn't make him a wiser person than one who is academically skillful. Academic skills can be sharpened and can be developed by sharpening the manas. So Sri Krishna here is making a very clear distinction between normal rishis and devarshis, and is singling out Narada. We'll come to that, why he's saying Narada is the greatest among the rishis, devarshis. And that is why he says, he represents me more than any other devarshi. So he's not saying that Narada is expressing the divinity or the vibhuti of the Lord fully, but among all the Dev-Rishis, he is far superior than others. And then we come to Gandharvas. Among the Gandharvas, I am Chitraratha. We'll see why he singles out Chitraratha. And of the Siddhas, I am Muni Kapila Muni. Kapila Muni, whose ashram, or maybe who is said to have lived in a place known as Ganga Sagar. There is a Kapila Ashrama there. He was the founder of the Sankhya philosophy, which gave rise to the philosophy of yoga. The yoga that we popularly know now is only one part of Patanjali's yoga. The real yoga is based on the Sankhya philosophy, which the founder of which was Kapila Muni. So the reason why is giving these four examples is Ashwatha is people, it is also known as people tree or the holy fig tree. It's not any ordinary fig tree, it's a holy fig tree. And strangely, it yields no edible fruit. I mean, some figs can be eaten, but they are not referring to that fig tree. There's nothing in this tree that is in any way materially useful to man. In fact, the mango tree or even the coconut tree is more useful because everything is used. So he could have said the coconut tree. But right from time immemorial, Ashwatha is considered, because of its nature, to demonstrate some kind of eternality. They say even if you cut the Ashwatha trees, Thakur used to give example of the Ashwatha or even the banyan tree. He used to say that no matter how much you cut, he used to give it as an example to illustrate how the ego never goes. You try to reduce it in some way, it manifests in some other way. So he says, no matter, even if you cut the tree, from the roots itself, a new shoot will come up and another tree will grow. So they say it's very difficult to destroy totally, to completely kill a Ashwatha tree. So though it is not very useful, it demonstrates a quality of permanence. That is what we are missing in life. We suffer because things around us which we thought are permanent just vanish at a moment's notice, because we have pinned our whole faith on those things. We think our relationships are eternal and suddenly they break and we become sad. We think our life is eternal, suddenly it goes. We cannot predict. There's so much of uncertainty in life. So there is this, in the midst of non-eternal things, holding on to something which is more eternal than the rest. There are certain things which are more permanent than the transient things. For example, the body is less permanent. The body lasts for 100 years. But they say the Sukshma Sharira, the mind and the subtle body, goes on. It goes on from birth to birth. We inherit the transmigration which Hindus, Buddhists and Jains believe. Now they very clearly say that the subtle body survives. In fact, all the Upanishads also point out to that. So the subtle body is more eternal, in the sense it is not eternal, that has its period, its span of life. But at the same time, it is definitely more eternal than, more permanent. I mean, it's less temporary than the body. So to give you an idea that this tree, among all the other trees, has some element of some survival instinct, which and it refuses to die, this Ashwatha tree. Ashwatha itself means that which cannot be destroyed. Anyway, so that's why it has been considered to be representing the eternal Brahman or Ishvara to a much larger extent than any other tree which has a lifespan. So it is always worshipped, associated with the worship of divine. In the Indian tradition, we always see that this Ashwatha tree is worshipped. During any puja, if you consider, it's a very popular tree in India, though you may not see these trees in this part of the world. But any thought of Ashwatha tree brings in its train these wonderful ideas of connected with God, whose nature is eternal. So for this reason, Ashwatha tree is recognized as his Vibhuti. That is one reason why Ashwatha has been listed here. The spiritually enlightened ones among all the rishis, they are called as rishis among all the human beings. It's not that they are supernatural beings. They are very much humans, human beings who have attained a high degree of wisdom, awakening of the buddhi, as they say, a higher faculty of the mind. It's not just the reactive part of the mind that has been developed, but also the intuitive faculty, which is referred to here. Rishi means one in whom anybody can be a rishi. Anyone in whom the intuitive faculty to understand things to develop wisdom in such a way that you can easily discriminate between the eternal and the non-eternal. It is known as Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. Sri Ramakrishna in his gospel, in his very simple Bengali language, used to say, you should be able to you should be able to discriminate between that which is permanent and that which is temporary. So that wisdom is not so easy to gain. It's only the rishis who have that insight. After repeated experiences, after receiving repeated experiences or repeated blows, you may say, because very often in spirituality, the first chapter itself is an indication that Arjuna was a very happy person till they were deprived of their kingdom. He thought he was very powerful. He and his 5 brothers, they had supernatural powers. They were very powerful. He was a powerful general, and there was no warrior as great as him. So he thought everything by developing some kind of expertise or power, he could rule over the whole world. But they lost the whole kingdom. They asked for 5 villages, they were not given that. And then he had to fight a battle in which he was arrayed against his own relatives. So that created a lot of confusion. And then suddenly he started talking philosophy on the battlefield with Arjuna, with Sri Krishna, suddenly giving up all the desire to fight a battle. Then he started arguing, why should I fight a battle where I have to kill my relatives and my own guru who has taught me archery, and or my own grandfather Bhishma Pitamaha, and all these people from whom I learned. So he suddenly on the battlefield, though he was thinking of war and he had planned for the war and he was confident of winning the war. In fact, when they were in the forest, they had won. He had single-handedly defeated the whole Duryodhana's army. So there was no lack of confidence, as it is normally pointed out, that he suddenly felt, no, he was a very powerful general. But then suddenly this idea, he felt as if the ground beneath him is shaking, is on very shaky foundations. He has come prepared for the war, because this will entail a lot of fights and killing. And there's so much of uncertainty that anybody may die. Maybe some Pandavas also will die, Kauravas will die, relatives will die, cousins will die. And after all, what's the purpose? What's the use of winning this war? Even after I win this war, he's trying to argue. Because all of a sudden, the transitory or the temporary nature, he thought that life is permanent. And he had enough prowess or enough skill to win a victory. But then suddenly he realized, what is the use when half the people, half my relatives, even my guru or even some of my brothers may die in this war. It's a terrible battle. So he suddenly wanted to withdraw from that. So Sri Krishna tells him that these things which he thinks, these temporary things, it's not he should have realized it before he even assembled here for the war. That is how Maya works, that we think many things are permanent. They give us security. But when things don't give us that kind of security, then we turn to God. The richest person, when he realizes that all the wealth will not save him, then perhaps a spark in him tells him that he ought to have been wiser. Like the young Nachiketa is telling his father He's in fact just 14 years old, or maybe even less, when he goes to Yama, the king of death. He said, I'm not going to be cheated by you. I know death is inevitable. Either today or tomorrow you are tempting me by giving me money and all those things I don't want, because I want a permanent solution. You can't cheat me. But that wisdom doesn't come to all. Even Nachiketa's father, who was his own guru in the Upanishad, he was the one who taught his son. But his son proved to be wiser, and that is why he got the solution of life. So this idea that wisdom which the rishis have, the wiser among the rishis are known as Devarshis. So among the rishis, Narada is the foremost. According to Puranas, because we understand these characters, the mythology, especially the Puranic characters, it is associated with lot of stories, and people try to picturize these. I mean, if you see some of the movies on Narada, he is considered to be a very wise and cunning fellow, and he's often criticized and picturized in many of our novels and or maybe stories that we create, that he is a mischief maker. He engages in Narad, in common parlance. If you see in any Indian, most of the stories, they'll bring in poor Narada and say he is the one who created these quarrels. But Sri Krishna is very particular, calling him the Srestha. Devarshi Nam Narada. I am Narada among the rishis. I am among the Devarshis, not just rishis. So he is foremost in one sense, that he is also seen as a person who always glorifies Narayana. So he is always singing his glory. That is one aspect of Narada. But he is also expert in setting up strifes and quarrels of one person with the other. Now, what's the purpose? Ultimately, if you see all these stories in our scriptures, there are a lot of Narada stories. These strifes and quarrels, which he normally engages two people in, it results in as a blessing in disguise. The disgust or the second chapter, the Vishada means it's depression. The first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is a Vishada Yoga. So it may be very strange for people to know how can Vishada bring in spiritual progress. Depression is supposed to be something which we should avoid. But this is a different kind of depression or different kind of setback in life which Sri Krishna is talking of. Narada creates this trouble to show the temporary nature, the fallacy of trusting in somebody who is temporary, on something which is temporary. So he tries to convey through the different stories and the different incidents that we see in the Puranas. Ultimately, he will end up saying that it would have better, you would have been better off if you stuck to holding on to God or repeating his divine name, because he was the one who promotes bhakti. So he says there is only one thing which is secure in life, and that is the Lord himself. No other thing, no other temporary thing can you hold on to. If you have to hold on to something, hold on to the Lord. So ultimately, that is the message he gives. So contact with Narada, though he is considered to be a mischievous person who creates quarrels, ultimately, the person who gets involved with him ultimately realizes the futility of depending on people and things of this world. And he holds on to the Lord himself, who gives us eternal, who empowers us, or who gives us eternal security. So, according to Krishna, being in touch with Narada is being in touch with God himself, Ishvara himself. He is therefore one of the glories of the Lord. Now, the Gandharvas, that is another aspect. They are also Gandharvas, they are, you see, you don't have to consider them as mystical beings. Among human beings, there is a classification. Devas, who are wise people, Gandharvas, who perform certain functions. So they have some useful traits. Gandharvas are supposed to uh, help people in cultivating a taste for the arts, the performing arts, the fine arts. You see, certain people, though they may be rich, they may be doing really well materially, they feel incomplete unless they have some kind of higher uh, pursuit or higher hobby, like pursuing music, because that brings out the noble nature in a human being. I mean, I'm talking of those arts and those performing arts or fine arts that uh, help us to evolve the potential divinity. There are certain arts which take you to a higher plane. In fact, art, the very purpose of arts, these arts, were to uh, sort of bring out the divine within. Every art was associated with the divine. Unfortunately, now it has become very commercial and it has degraded to the level of, I mean, it has been trivialized. That is why our wonderful tradition of Drupad music, Dhruvapada, which was started as a music which enables you to reach God. The notes were, if in fact, if you read Swami Vivekananda's thoughts on music, he was a good musician himself. He excelled in the art of Dhruvapad singing. Dhruvapad was the original Indian form of music, but unfortunately it was brought down to the level of Khayal and other forms of Hindustani music when we came in touch with the Mughals. Because from the singing which was done to please God, it was reduced to a singing which was associated with dance and which took place in the courts. So the music suffered a degradation. That's why Swamiji wanted to revive that Drupad music. So these Gandharvas, they are divine celestial, they are personifications of artists who excel in these fine arts. They may be good painters, they may be good musicians, even good physicians who develop medicine as an art, not as a profession or as a commercial thing. That in ancient India, if you see, most of these Vaids, they were all divinely inspired people. Sushruta, who and the Charaka and all those great physicians, they were divine people. So they are associated with these Gandharvas. So they may be expert physicians, musicians, but still they are clinging to the world. So even gambling, which is considered to be a very profane art, gambling is also art. That is what he was very fond of, Yudhishthira, and he lost in gambling. That's why he lost the kingdom. So Gandharvas are fond of all these worldly things, though they are highly evolved beings. So they sometimes teach these arts and the finer aspects of these Gandharvas. They always help the human being to evolve themselves to a slightly higher level. And Chitraratha, he is among all the Gandharvas. The Lord says that don't be an ordinary Gandharva who will cause, I mean, whose arts, who trivializes this art and brings it to the level of animals or human beings. If he elevates a person, those arts, those music forms, those dance forms, everything that takes you towards the Lord, that is a proper art. So that is why they say, the Lord says, Chitraratha represents me. There are many Gandharvas, but some of them demean a person. They do not lead to some kind of nobility in a person's character, whoever pursues those arts. So he says Chitraratha is the king of these heavenly beings whom we term as Gandharvas. They call it heavenly. Heaven is not something which is inaccessible or is in a subtle realm. They are very much human beings, but because of their divine, their capacity to manifest divine qualities through these fine arts, and performing arts, they were called Gandharvas. So that is why those great musicians are given the title of Gandharva, even today in our Indian tradition. Then he comes to the last category among Siddhas. He says, I am among Siddhanam Kapila Muni. So why he has singled out Kapila? Siddhas are those excellent human beings who right from birth, they are excel in righteousness, wisdom, truthfulness, and they have many qualities which make them far superior human beings. Kapilo Muni. Muni, what does Muni means? It has come from the word Mauna. Mauna means silence. One who is constantly absorbed in silent japa, japa yajna. So he is known as Muni. So sage Kapila is endowed with all these virtues. Now there is a wonderful story about this Kapila. Kapila Muni's mother, there is a beautiful chapter in the Bhagavata, Kapila Devahuti Samvad. Devahuti was the mother of Kapila. She lost her husband when Kapila was very young, but he was a born wise sage. He was a Muni, he was a born saint. And she knew that this boy will one day leave the house and become a monk. She was prepared for that, but at the same time, she did her duties as a dutiful housewife when her husband was alive. And when he suddenly passed away, she continued to give the best of whatever a mother can give, because Kapila was her only son. Devahuti was her name. And she was very particular. In those days, rituals had to be performed. Mostly it was done by the strange thing is that no ritual was complete if the husband and wife did not do that ritual together. That is why we find in our ancient, the spiritual practices revolved around the house. There was no idea of going to temples and other things. Congregational worship was unheard of. It may look strange to you, but it was the Buddhists who introduced the temple worship, that congregational worship. Indians always believed that worship should be at home and it should be done according to the Vedic rites, the Havana. There would be a fire that would be burning, and both husband and wife, who was known as a Sahadharmini, means all the dharmas, nothing, no ritual or no puja, or nothing would be complete if the husband and wife were not there. But when the husband died or the wife died, then they could do it alone. Otherwise, they had to do it together. So, Kapila was, when Kapila died, Kapila's father died, Devahuti continued whatever rituals they did as if her husband was alive. Whatever he did, whatever she was taught, because they did it together. So she knew everything and did all the rituals according to the scriptures. And still, and she, when Kapila grew up and wanted to leave the house, he went to his mother to seek permission. He said, I am going to take monastic vows, so please allow me to go. He, of course, made arrangements for her to somebody to look after his mother, aged mother. And she was a dutiful mother. So she said, I have done all my duties. Now the decision is yours. But before you leave, tell me something. Give me some wisdom. That is the whole text of the Kapila Devahuti Samvad. It's a beautiful chapter in the Bhagavata. So there, Kapila is talking to his mother. Mother asks him a very simple question. He said, like any other wife and also a widow, after my husband died, I have seen to it that I have never given up any of the rituals that are prescribed for a householder. I have done everything. I have given you education. I have done almost everything and as far as I know, I have done no evil in my life. So I have led such a wonderful life. I just want to ask you, before you leave, because you are definitely, she respected her son and her desire and his desire to become a monk. He said, see, makes you go and lead a life of renunciation? I have done everything, whatever the scriptures prescribe, but somehow there is no peace of mind. So before you go, give me something which will enable me to live a peaceful life where my mind, the something is tormenting me. Do you think all the things I did when your father was alive, I did everything that was prescribed by the scriptures? I did all the pujas, all the rituals. Even after he passed away, I didn't stop anything. So then what is the reason why I'm still, there's some kind of deep dissatisfaction. So since you are going, you please give me the answer to this and then you go, so that I can make my life meaningful after you go. I know you are doing the right thing, but I feel you have more wisdom. It's a beautiful conversation between the mother and the child. And the not child, he was grown up, Kapila Muni. He was right from birth, he was a very wise person, and he inherited, wonderful spiritual qualities from his father. But anyway, he tells her, he answers that question with a beautiful verse, which is the central core of the Bhagavatam. He says that why you are not getting, why your mind is not peaceful is because you have done all these rituals. You have done puja, but you have ignored the God who is within, or the God who is present in other human beings. By ignoring them, just by doing some kind of ritualistic worship, will not give you the peace of mind, because the real place where you can encounter God is in your own heart, or maybe in your own consciousness, the center of your consciousness, which is within. And for that same reason, there is the same consciousness there in other human beings. So by ignoring people or ignoring the consciousness that is in other human beings and not serving them with the spirit of God in man, your external worship did not yield results. No matter how meticulously you did, it was all external. Whereas the God whom you are worshipping is neither in the temples, nor in the puja, nor in the rituals, but he is in the hearts of men. So because you ignored the Lord which was in the hearts of men, you did not take efforts to develop that aspect of the personality where you encountered people as not just mere human beings, but as divine beings, and did not perform that kind of worship, the service of God in man. When you do that, he said, you will find that peace which is eluding you. So that is how Kapila was endowed with such a wonderful wisdom, and he is also considered to be the author of Sankhya system of philosophy, based on which the entire yoga school has been developed. Patanjali's yoga is based upon the Sankhya system. Sankhya system is very simple. It is a dualistic system where two realities, the human personality is made of two realities. One is the Purusha, which is the pure consciousness within us, which is eternal, which does not change, and a reality other than Purusha, that is Prakriti, which is ever changing. So the goal of human life, according to the Sankhya philosophers, is to somehow identify with the Purusha. The more you identify with Prakriti, the more the changing world around you will confuse you. The more gross you become, the more confused you become. And when you become totally confused or totally unable to find any stability in life, then you take up the reverse journey. You go back to your original source, which gave you stability. And that stability you can get when you meditate on the Purusha, which is within. That in brief is the Sankhya philosophy. Of course, there is a huge philosophical framework which will try to explain the 24 elements of Sankhya, of Prakriti, or how it manifests from the causal to the subtle, subtle level to the gross universe that we see around us, and how one can meditate. That is how yoga teaches us. Yoga says, no matter how gross you are, the way you evolved, we call it material evolution. Material evolution evolves externally. Darwin was right when he said materially we go on evolving. But there is another phenomena in Sankhya which is known as involving. We have involved he says, if the amoeba has evolved to become a human being and then human being has evolved to become a Buddha, then that Buddha nature must be present in the amoeba also. You cannot get, it is as science says, that there cannot be no cause, though if effect without a cause. So if there is a primal cause from which this universe has evolved, definitely it was involved in an involved form in the virus or that amoeba also. It cannot be otherwise. How can something evolve out of nothing? It has to come from something. So that Purusha was already there. In fact, that is a slightly better explanation than the idea of evolution which Darwin proposed. This was the idea which Swami Vivekananda discussed when he met Nikola Tesla. Though Tesla was not a biologist, he was a physicist, but he liked this idea of Sankhya. And he said, if I get a chance, I'll try to demonstrate that this is a very sound scientific principle. He in fact went to Tesla and Tesla's laboratory. He wanted to demonstrate the unification of all the forces. He liked that idea that prana means all the energies, the combination or the evolution of energies, different energies, they evolve into one another. The electromagnetic, the gravitational. It's a very complex theory in modern physics. They're in search of a unified energy theory or a unified field theory, as they call it, where all the fields that we see around us, all the forces of nature can be reduced to one force. That has been the effort which scientists made. And Tesla was surprised to know that Kapila had already propounded a Sankhya system where all the forces of nature are reduced to Prakriti, which he calls as Avyakta. It is unmanifest. When it manifests, it appears as matter, as energy, or it is interchanged into one another. When you destroy matter, you get energy. When you condense energy, it becomes matter. So that borderline between energy and matter vanishes in fundamental physics, nuclear physics, in the quantum physics. We come to a stage where you don't know whether something is matter or it is energy. It just keeps on oscillating between the two states. So that idea fascinated Tesla. And unfortunately, he wanted to develop a mathematical model based on this Sankhya idea of Prakriti. But unfortunately, could not do it in his lifetime. But he was fascinated. So this Sankhya system of philosophy was, the founder was Kapila Muni. So he says, among all the Siddhas, he was not just a theoretical, he did not just give a theoretical explanation of creation. In fact, he had realized this Purusha or the Brahman. In Vedanta, we call it Brahman, the pure consciousness. So he had realized that. That is why he is known as a Siddha. A Siddha is one who is not bound by the forces of Prakriti. He somehow manages to free himself from the clutches of Prakriti. That is what yoga does. So Sankhya Yoga, it is also known as Sankhya Yoga. The Sankhya system is also known as Sankhya Yoga because yoga cannot survive without Sankhya. Sankhya cannot survive without the practical explanation of Patanjali's yoga, which considers the Purusha or the consciousness to be primary and all other manifestations as secondary. So he is considered to be one who propounded this philosophy, the highest philosophy which is thought of by man, by the mind of man. So Sri Krishna is definitely, Kapila would have been more ancient than Sri Krishna because he is mentioned in the Bhagavata also. So whatever may be the historical truth associated with this, he precedes, he predates, you can say, Sri Krishna himself. So he lived in an age much before the Mahabharata or before the Gita was expounded by Sri Krishna. So Sankhya is one of the oldest philosophies. So he says among all the Siddhas, Kapila Muni, who is he is a manifestation of the glory of the Lord in the Siddhas. There are many Siddhas. They have realized truth in their own way, lower forms of truth. There are many sects and schools of thought. But among all those schools of thought, Kapila Muni is the greatest among that. So it is but natural that the Lord says, compares himself. He said, he is my representative, or you can see the glory of the Lord more manifest in Kapila Muni than other people. So now we come to the verse 27th. I'll just read that because we have just 5 minutes with us. So here is mentioning some mythological characters, which the significance of which is not very clear. But there are certain Puranic stories based on which he says, among all the horses. Now, Uchchai Shravasa Ashwanam. Now, he is taking, like just as he took the different trees, he said, among all the horses. Of course, there are many species of horses, one far superior than the other. We have the Arabian breed, we have the Indian horses, there's so many horses, but he's not speaking from a biological point of view. Biologically, one horse may be superior to some other horse, but here he's talking of a celestial horse, which is known as Uchchai Shravas. It's rather strange. Uchchai Shravas means one who cannot hear, one has to shout. It's rather strange, it's a strange name. So, but there is a story behind this. Why he is Uchchai Shravas, that is the name. Uchchai Shravasam Ashwanam Vidhi Mama Amruta Udbhavam. Means I have that Uchchai Shravas, I'll tell you what it is. Airavatam Gajendranam. Among elephants, I am Gajendra, Gaja Indra. The elephant that was used by Indra is known as Gajendra. Indra is supposed to be the king of the gods, Devas. So he uses an elephant who is far superior than all the other elephants found on the earth, and that is known as Airavatam. These are all symbolical, but anyway, there is an explanation for that. We'll just see why he considers Uchchai Shravas as the greatest among horses, and because of a certain reason. Vidhi Mam Amruta Udbhavam. What does it mean? We'll see. Airavatam Gajendranam. Among all the elephants, I am Gajendra, the elephant which is used by Indra himself. Naranam cha Naradipam. Now we'll find what is Naradipa. Among all the men, I am a monarch. Naradipa, the Adipa means one who controls men. So I am a king among all the men. That is what he wants to say. So there is a story where the churning of the ocean of milk, it's known as Kshira Sagara. Kshira means milk. So there is a story where Devas and Asuras. Again, if you see, Devas are beings who are noble in nature. Asuras may be stronger than Devas, but they are evil in nature. In the world, we see very often the wicked people are very often stronger than the good people. So that is why Swamiji insisted that it's not enough to be good. You have to be good and strong. Because of the strength, the Asuras very often won the battle and defeated the Devas. So to be good is not enough. One has to be strong. Not only good, but good and strong to survive and to win the battle against the bad, evil, who are also strong. So there are evil people who, because of their discipline, because of their, Asuras are not always wicked people. Sometimes they are power hungry people, but they worked hard to become very strong. So very often you see in Indian mythology, the Asuras end up winning the battle and the Devas go helplessly to Indra, and Indra helplessly, because he is the lord of Devas, he loses the battle. Though he is good natured, they are good people, but good people should be strong. Then they have to go to Vishnu or Shiva or some avatara, or maybe some the creator himself to uh, survive. So that is very often seen in the Puranas. There are so many stories of Asuras and Devas. There is one such story where the Devas and Asuras knew that there is a there is an ocean of milk which is known as Kshira Sagar. It's all symbolic. Where Devas or Asuras, they say if we churn that, we'll get a pot of nectar which will make us immortal. So this from that, this celestial horse, the horse Uchcheshravas, which is considered to be one of the horses which was involved in that, it came out first. The horses and the Airavata, both of them came as a result of this churning of this ocean. So Airavata was taken by Indra. Uchcheshravas also was the celestial horse. Obviously, they were taken away by the Devas, because Devas and Asuras together churned the ocean. So first they say poison came out. And the Devas knew that if this poison spreads, we'll all die. Then Shiva was asked to come. These are symbolic stories. Shiva comes and drinks that poison. That is why his throat is blue. He had the capacity to digest that poison. So first the poison comes, then all the nectar and all this elephant, Airavata and all those things. But this event is just an allegory. It is just an explanation. It's not, you cannot take it literally. It's a statement of eternal process where good and bad people jointly churn the ocean of life. It's not that only bad people dominate. Good people, and sometimes unknowingly, or they team up with bad people. They may not intend, but somehow they good and bad people jointly churn the ocean of life. This is just symbolic. Kshira Sagar, or the milk, ocean of milk, is just symbolic. So to obtain happiness through wealth, learning and prosperity, both good and evil people join together. When we go after certain pursuits of knowledge which enable us to lead better lives, all scientists, all doctors, all engineers are not good. There are good engineers, but there are evil people also waiting to misuse the benefits they get by this wealth, learning and prosperity. So wealth, power and everything results in a mixture. So the eternal process is going on to show that it's not necessary that pursuit of wealth, learning and prosperity which we see around, if it falls into the hands of bad people, that is asuras, it can spell disaster for human beings. So I think I'll have to close now, because somebody has kept his audio on. Can you just see that somebody has forgotten to mute himself? Anyway, the time is running out, so I'll just conclude, and we will begin the verse number 28 in our next class. That is the next, not the next Saturday, but the Saturday after that. So I'll conclude. Om Shanti 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 Hari.